right, guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of bodybuilding through the decades starting in the late 1800s up until today. Of course, our dominant Mr. Olympia of today. Um, Talk about the evolution of the physiques, talk about when I think maybe drug use started to come into play and other things as well. Now, the first guy that really is known as the father of modern bodybuilding, or bodybuilding, I should say, not really modern bodybuilding, is Eugene Sandow. Of course, the Sandow Trophy was named after him. One of the first real bodybuilders, one of the first guys who really displayed his physique uh, and his musculature for public display. Now, he's known as, again, the father of bodybuilding. Um, the unique thing about Eugene Sandow is that he died trying to lift his car out of a ditch. So he was trying to just lift his car, apparently, and he died of a brain aneurysm. Uh, Now that's the rumor. I don't know if that's true or not. But and then along after Sandow, it's interesting because Charles Atlas kind of made it. You've all seen the 97-pound weakling who transforms into the he gets sand kicked in his face and he transforms. He comes back and slaps the bully. About this program. Well, that program is, of course, advertised with Charles Atlas's picture and physique. Actually one of the most successful advertising promotions in the history of the world. Actually, ran for, and I think it's still running to this day. Ran for many decades. But Charles Atlas, relatively soft physique by today's standards, but still an outstanding physique. Would have been considered a very muscular man back in those days. After Charles Atlas came John Grimek. Now, this is where I think maybe Grimek might have started experimenting with testosterone or Dianabol or something along those lines. Because he kind of developed a thicker, denser physique, yet was kind of smooth. So that's kind of a look that you get with, say, Dianabol or testosterone. So again, Grimek was a real thick dude, real successful bodybuilder, inspired a lot of different people from the late 30s until through the 40s. Then along came Steve Reeves. Now, Steve Reeves was the Arnold Schwarzenegger of his day, a huge movie star. Actually, I think he was the highest paid actor in Europe for a while. And I do feel that Steve Reeves probably dabbled in Dianabol, testosterone, maybe. I do feel that he did that, and a lot of people do believe that. Although Steve Reeves himself denies that. But Steve Reeves really pioneered the muscular look for the movies. So you got to give Steve Reeves props. Had the movie star looks, definitely going for him. So he was kind of the Arnold Schwarzenegger of his day. After Steve Reeves came the great Bill Pearl. Now, Bill Pearl um, also was a very dense guy, great poser. This is a classic picture of Bill Pearl right here. Look at the arms on this guy and the thin waist. I mean, clearly not natural. I mean, but who cares? This is bodybuilding, and this is another really cool picture of him. You can just see the density and the symmetry on Bill Pearl. It's pretty crazy. I mean, that would be a great physique by today's standards, obviously. But Bill Pearl made a name for himself in the 50s, all the way up to the 70s. Bill Pearl was around. So then, of course, the first Mr. Olympia winner was Larry Scott. And Larry was also known for his great arms. I think he's got the Scott curl, which is like a preacher curl kind of thing. It's actually named after him. Really trained his arms really hard. Had huge forearms, tight waist, like so many guys of that day. The main focus back then was not the legs, although, they had decent legs. I mean, they did not have freaky legs compared to today's bodybuilders, but it was all about mainly the upper body and just getting some relatively decent wheels underneath you. But Larry Scott was, again, known for his tremendous arms, and he was the very first Olympia winner. Then came a guy, I'm skipping over some guys, obviously, but then came a guy obviously we've all heard of, and whose son is actually doing very well now, Sergio Oliva. Sergio Oliva was known as the Myth, and this guy, this guy had everything. I mean, and of course, Sergio admits to taking steroids, eating Diana balls like candy, I think he said. But look at the tiny waist on this guy and the massive arms, the huge forearms. Uh, just an outstanding physique. Here he is next to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sergio, of course, was considered one of the most physically gifted bodybuilders of all time. Now Arnold did end up beating him in probably a lot of people remember the story where he kind of psyched Sergio out, saying he was going to go out into the crowd and this kind of thing. And you can kind of do some research on that, but it is out there. Holy dog, slow down. Oh my God. So after Sergio again, of course, is probably the most famous bodybuilder of all time. Well, definitely the most famous bodybuilder of all time. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, Arnold, well, I mean, let's face it, he basically is the most popular bodybuilder of all time. Probably will always be the most popular bodybuilder of all time. And simply because he had everything. He had the physique, he had the look, he had the confidence, he had the personality, he had the smarts, and he had the desire to become not only the greatest bodybuilder on the planet, and at one time probably the most famous actor on the planet as well, but also the governor of California. So this guy's pretty much done it all. Of course, you know, he's older right now, but still not looking too bad for a guy of his age. Definitely one of the greatest classical physiques of all time, Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you ask anybody to name one bodybuilder, even a person walking down the street, they're going to probably say Arnold Schwarzenegger. So after Arnold, you know, he had some guys in between that were, you know, won the Mr. Olympia. You know, Franco won it, Frank Zane. But really, the next dominant bodybuilder, in my opinion, was the great Lee Haney. Now, Lee Haney brought a new level of size and a new level of definition in the back and legs to bodybuilding, and he was absolutely dominant. Just a genetic freak. Not the greatest arms per se, but he had a tremendous back. And you know, this is when people started filling out their legs as well. So when Lee turned around, I mean, it was over for a lot of people. He had just a great back, great V taper, you know, broad shoulders. So Lee Haney goes down as one of the greatest bodybuilders, clearly, of all time. Now, after Lee Haney decided to retire, that opened the door for the guy who probably ushered in the true mass monsters of the Olympia, and that is, of course, the great Dorian Yates. Now, this guy, I did a little video earlier about Dorian probably ushering in the use of insulin when he made the dramatic jump from 92 to 93 in his physique. I'm guessing, and a lot of people are guessing as well, Dorian implemented the first large-scale use of insulin in bodybuilding in terms of the Olympia level. Experimented with that. Here's a pic of his transformation. Now, I'm not saying he started it, but I'm saying he's probably the best-known bodybuilder at that time who probably kicked in the massive use of insulin. And, of course, after that, talk about size. Now, this guy took size to an even greater level. And that is, of course, in my opinion, the best bodybuilder of all time, Ronnie Coleman. Now, Ronnie, you know, like Ronnie and Dorian started to have trouble with injuries because of their simply how they train, the massive lifts, the hardcore training. Ronnie was known for his brute strength, and he made a great. You know, in the beginning, he was not one of the top guys in the Olympia, but he really added size and mass to his physique and just blew everybody out the door, and even took the back to the next level in defeating you know, everybody with that huge, incredible back, gigantic thighs. And this guy trained like a power lifter, so he was an absolute beast. Probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, Mr. Olympia of all time. And in my opinion, the greatest physique to ever win the Mr. Olympia. That's Ronnie Coleman. Now, after Ronnie Coleman, you had Jay Cutler. Uh, Jay, pretty popular bodybuilder, smart businessman, done well for himself. Not known for his hardcore training, but not known to have any injuries either. I mean, injuries ended the careers basically of Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman to some extent. So when you Google Jay Cutler, of course, Jay Cutler, the football player, comes up. He's more famous, obviously, but Jay Cutler, the bodybuilder, has done very well for himself. Still remains in the spotlight in bodybuilding, and he certainly deserves a mention. Now, from Jay Cutler, of course, we go to the current Mr. Olympia, and that is Phil Heath, Mr. 3D himself. Now, Phil really, can anybody beat Phil? Phil came into the Olympia a couple times, not really at his best. And he still was able to dominate the Olympia stage. So somebody's going to have to come in really good shape to beat Phil Heath. And I mean, it's possible, but Phil Heath has that 3D look. I mean, this picture is amazing. You can just see even in a picture, you still can see the bulges and the definition and just the overall density of Phil Heath. I mean, it's just a sight to behold. Now, whether you like Phil Heath or not, you do have to admit that he is a dominant bodybuilder, and he's going to be a tough guy to beat. So this is what bodybuilding has become, a complete package. Phil's not the widest guy, but he does bring the complete package to the stage as far as depth, from front to back goes, and that 3D effect on his muscle, which is probably a genetic gift that a lot of people don't have. So that's kind of my rundown of bodybuilding through the decades.